Two patrol cars pulled up to my barbecue like they were raiding a drug den. Sirens blaring, lights flashing, rookies stepping out with hands near holsters. Meanwhile, half the off-duty officers from my old precinct stood frozen mid-bite, holding paper plates and confused hot dogs. The call that brought them here came from across the street, from a woman named Donna Minton, HOA president, self-appointed guardian of lawn symmetry and community fear. She told 911 there were armed impersonators gathering in tactical formation. What she actually saw were real cops eating ribs in my backyard. The fact that I'm a retired police captain apparently escaped her notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. Donna wasn't trying to prevent crime. She was trying to control the neighborhood, and she picked the wrong man to target. Drop a comment and tell us where you're tuning in from. If you're into wild, true-feeling stories with twists, justice, and just the right dose of HOA drama, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story, it's even crazier. And trust me, the surprises we've got coming, you'll want a front row seat. I'm Cal Weston, 32 years in the force. Spent more time de-escalating real threats than most people spend in line at Costco. After retirement, my wife Jules and I bought a house in Foxwater Pines, quiet, neat, HOA regulated to the point of absurdity. I figured if I could survive hostage negotiations and city budget meetings, I could handle neighborhood bylaws. I was wrong. On move-in day, Donna warned me about non-regulation house numbers. Then it was our mailbox, our mulch color, and eventually our excessively casual lawn chairs. I thought maybe she'd get bored and move on, but by the time she left a warning about our solar pathway lights, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a one-woman regime. So, for our first weekend, Jules suggested a housewarming. Small gathering. Some neighbors, a few close friends. Naturally, that meant retired cops and their families. No booze, no noise complaints, just ribs, music, and enough lemon bars to get a dentist fired. It wasn't a party. It was a Sunday afternoon with good people and bad jokes. Around 6 o'clock, Officer Tina Grant showed up in uniform. She came straight from a shift, badge still clipped to her chest, sidearm on her hip. Harmless, right? Not to Donna. Within 20 minutes, she had dialed 911 and reported what she believed to be a group of impersonators with weapons. She used words like threatening posture and unauthorized gathering, which in suburbia is code for people I don't recognize, doing things I don't like. That's how Officers Kai and Penner ended up in my driveway. Two fresh recruits who followed protocol to the letter. Backup called, sirens on, ready for confrontation. They didn't know it was my house. They didn't recognize the people they were about to question. And that moment, when I stepped out holding a plate of ribs and introduced myself as Captain Weston, is something I'll never forget. Penner's eyes widened. Kai looked like he'd just hit reply all on the wrong email. Across the street, Donna raised her wine glass like she'd just uncovered a terrorist cell. I could see it in her face. She thought she'd saved the neighborhood. She had no idea she'd just called in a tactical response on the people who used to train tactical responses. I wasn't mad at the rookies. They followed the book. But the book doesn't cover what happens when a neighborhood bully learns how to dial 911 like it's a weapon. That's what this was, panic performance dressed in authority. One false word, one twitch, and someone could have drawn a weapon. A kid could have panicked. A dog could have barked wrong. It's not just ignorance. It's dangerous. Jules came up beside me and said quietly, "She really called it in." I nodded. "And she's proud of it." That was when Tina started recording. Across the yard, Donna was back on her porch, now shouting about charges and false officers. I turned to the guests, took a breath, and raised my voice. "Everyone relax. The only thing criminal here is my overcooked corn." A few laughs broke the tension. Even Holcomb, my old deputy chief, lifted his soda like a toast. I looked across the street and locked eyes with Donna. She gave me a nod like this was just another HOA success story. But I knew what she didn't. This wasn't about lawn chairs anymore. This was about what happens when power gets handed to the wrong person with no one willing to push back. Well, someone just did. I woke up the next morning still tasting the smoke from the grill and the bitterness from the look Donna gave me as those patrol cars pulled away. Jules was already up, sipping coffee and scrolling through the neighborhood Facebook group like it was her morning paper. "You're famous," she muttered, turning the screen toward me. There it was, Donna's post. "Suspicious gathering at 47 Indigo Lane." Attached, a blurry photo of our backyard, snapped through what looked like a window screen. Her caption said, "Possible impersonators, unclear authority, concerning activity." Jules read it aloud with that sarcastic flair only a retired ER nurse can pull off. "Concerning activity," she said, "like lemon bars and folding chairs." We laughed, but it didn't sit right with me. That post was a warning shot. Donna was framing the story before anyone else could. She was trying to win the narrative war. What she didn't know was, I've read better scripts and police reports written on 2 hours of sleep and a stale donut. So I started my file, not in anger but in instinct, like brushing your teeth or locking your front door, reflexive. I've spent decades building cases against people who thought their egos were smarter than the evidence. This wasn't going to be any different. I titled it Foxwater Documentation and created subfolders: HOA correspondence, Facebook posts, video footage, resident statements. Jules saw what I was doing and said, "You're not letting this go, are you?" I said, "Nope, and I shouldn't." Then she tossed another sheet in front of me. "She reported a kid's lemonade stand last summer," she said, pointing to a post Donna had made in June. "The accusation? Unregulated commercial activity." I rubbed my forehead. "Selling lemonade?" Jules nodded. "And wind chimes?" she added. Too melodic, disturbed the ambiance. I swear, if HOA bylaws ever become an Olympic sport, Donna could sweep the gold in all categories: solo aggression, synchronized judgment, and passive-aggressive freestyle. By noon, I'd confirmed what I suspected. Donna wasn't new to this. She was seasoned. 32 violation reports filed under her name in just 12 months. Half were absurd. One accused a delivery driver of suspicious blinking. Another described a child sidewalk chalk as potentially political in nature. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or check for hidden microphones in my azaleas. I reached out to Tina, who sent me her full video from the housewarming. Crystal clear, real badges, real officers, zero impersonation. Holcomb texted offering to write a signed statement verifying the guest list. Even Manny, our precinct prankster, dropped off stills from his body cam just in case. It felt like building a case in slow motion. No flashing lights, no takedown, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth was stacking up, line by line, while Donna was still busy curating conspiracies from behind her curtain. What I hadn't expected was how quickly the neighborhood started noticing. A neighbor named Rhonda, 2 houses over, waved me down that afternoon. "You know, she cited me last year for aggressive planting," she said. "I grew rosemary cowl." Then came Walter, who claimed Donna brought a bubble level to measure the angle of his mailbox. She said it leaned left. Politically and structurally, even the Jenkins couple chimed in. "We got flagged for excessive porch sitting," they whispered, looking over their shoulder like Donna had moles in the shrubbery. I didn't laugh. Not out of politeness, but because I'd heard this tune before. At the station, we called it pattern stacking. 1 complaint can be noise, 3 complaints might be coincidence. But when it's 15 neighbors with stories that rhyme, that's a pattern. And patterns tell the truth more clearly than any HOA newsletter ever could. Jules called it HOA Jenga. Every time I logged another document, another bizarre post, it felt like I was pulling a block from the bottom of Donna's power tower. And here's where it got interesting. While combing through the HOA bylaws, you know, those 26 pages of dry control disguised as civic order, I found a clause buried so deep you'd miss it if you blinked. Any officer or board member found to engage in repeated harassment or malicious misuse of authority shall be subject to review and possible removal by a majority vote of members. 1 sentence. Hidden between lawn height regulations and garbage day etiquette. I read it twice. Then I highlighted it, underlined it, and added it to my file, because that sentence, that was the brick. Not flashy, not dramatic, but if you pulled it just right, the whole tower wobbled. That night, we sat on the porch watching Donna reposition her decorative porch rocks. It would have been funny if it weren't so strategic. I knew she wasn't going to stop, not unless someone made her. The problem is, people like Donna don't get scared by yelling. They don't flinch at confrontation. But they hate exposure. They crumble under facts, paperwork, procedure. And that's exactly what I had. What started as a cookout with lemon bars was now a documented pattern of targeted harassment and abuse of authority. And the more she doubled down, the deeper she dug herself. I didn't need to win the argument. I just needed to keep collecting the truth until it outgrew her lies. Because you don't need a badge to weaponize panic. You just need a clipboard and a superiority complex. And Donna? She had both in spades. And just when I thought I'd seen all the red flags Donna could wave, the next chapter proved she hadn't even started her parade. Because what I uncovered next? Let's just say the HOA president wasn't just enforcing rules. She was rewriting them in her own image. So, if you're hooked on true feeling stories packed with power plays, poetic justice, and just the right kick of HOA drama, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The next part is where things really start to unravel, and trust me, you won't want to miss how deep this rabbit hole goes. They say when you shine a light long enough, the roaches either scatter or pretend to be part of the furniture. Donna? She just doubled down on the wallpaper. 2 days after I finished organizing my Donna dossier, I met Raina Cordell at a coffee shop just outside the neighborhood. Civil rights attorney, razor sharp, and, as it turns out, a former HOA target herself. 3 months earlier, Donna had fined her for painting her porch trim a shade incompatible with communal tranquility. It was beige. Not neon, beige. Raina didn't just win in mediation, she added a clause to the bylaws that limited HOA power over personal aesthetic. So when I slid the file across the table, she smirked and said, "I've been waiting for this day." That's when I knew I wasn't the first to be pushed. I was just the first one stubborn enough to push back with a file folder and a pension. We started reaching out quietly. Neighbors, former board members, even the FedEx guy who refused to walk up her driveway after she filed a trespass concern about his uniform. One by one, the stories poured in. Marge, retired kindergarten teacher, fined for sidewalk chalk, not hers, her granddaughter's. The note said unauthorized visual messaging. A couple on Maple Bend got cited for non-regulation tulips. The flowers were apparently unseasonably warm in tone. Raina actually laughed when she read that one and said, "What does she want, court-approved daffodils?" Then there was the single mom who got flagged 3 times in 1 month, once for irregular birdhouse spacing, once for porch music exceeding tonal softness, and once for repetitive door use during nap hours. She cried while telling us, said she thought it was just her. That's the thing with bullies in khakis. They isolate, then enforce. But now people were speaking up, and speaking up with company. We started mapping the pattern. The people Donna targeted weren't loud or reckless. They were quiet. Elderly, divorced, single parents, non-white families, folks who didn't show up to meetings or bake sale subcommittees. She wasn't keeping order. She was picking off the unguarded. Her fines weren't about violations. They were signals. You don't fit my mold. It was HOA rule enforcement dressed up like community spirit, but really it was just fear wrapped in pastel formatting. And somehow, for years, it worked. She maintained power not by yelling, but by clipping, one violation at a time, like a paper cut campaign. But now, the paper trail was getting long, and it was no longer in her hands. The language she used in her reports bordered on satire. She cited a man's flagpole as visually aggressive. She once labeled Halloween decorations as unregulated pagan display materials. I'm not kidding. Raina read that one aloud and said, "I feel like I'm litigating a dystopian HOA theme park." We started collecting these phrases into a document of their own, just to highlight the absurdity. Jules added a title, Foxwater HOA Glossary of Grievances. It became oddly therapeutic. By showing people the ridiculous patterns in Donna's reports, They started laughing, and then realizing humor broke the fear. Once neighbors realized they weren't alone, the silence cracked like old paint. That's how change starts. Not with a fight, but with the realization that the Queen doesn't have soldiers, just a loud voice and a stack of letterhead. By the end of the week, we had statements from 11 households and 3 former board members. One of them, an older gentleman named Harvey, told us Donna forced him off the board after he disagreed with her spring neutrality planting guidelines. He said she accused him of aesthetic sabotage. I asked if he kept the email. He had, printed, highlighted, in a file marked, "For when someone finally stops her." Harvey wasn't a fighter, but he was ready. That's what struck me most. These people weren't weak. They were just waiting for someone to say, "Hey, this isn't normal," because when a community gets used to nonsense, they forget it's nonsense. Donna had become a routine, like HOA taxes, annoying, unfair, but expected. Until now. That night, Raina looked over the folder we'd built and said, "You've got enough here to trigger a formal HOA ethics hearing." She paused. "But if you want this to last, we go bigger." I knew what she meant. This wasn't just about my barbecue or Jules' solar lights. It wasn't even about Donna anymore. It was about the culture she'd built. One woman with a title and a grudge had managed to turn Foxwater Pines into a fear-based feedback loop. It was orderly, yes, but in the same way a library is orderly when everyone's afraid to speak. That's not harmony. That's quiet coercion. And in my book, it doesn't belong in any zip code. So I gave Raina the green light. "Let's take it past the board," I said. "Let's go to the city." She smiled. "Good. I already drafted the outline." Because that's what Donna never counted on. Not resistance, but structure. Not chaos, but calm documentation. She thought her neighbors were too polite, too quiet, too afraid. But the truth is, the silent majority wasn't silent anymore. They were just waiting for a captain, and lucky for them, I wasn't the retiring type. The investigator showed up on a Tuesday morning wearing khakis, a button-down shirt, and the exact expression you'd expect from someone who's about to read 200 pages of suburban nonsense. His name was Jerome. He carried a clipboard, a city badge, and the emotional weight of a man who's seen one too many rogue HOA presidents in his career. I met him on the porch with a binder so thick it made his eyebrows twitch. "This all from the past year?" he asked. I nodded. Every report, every fine, every shady little notice of concern. He chuckled, then immediately stopped himself like he wasn't sure it was allowed. "Well," he said, flipping the cover open, "let's see what we've got." And just like that, the most entertaining HOA audit in Foxwater Pines history began, with coffee, caution, and one very overwhelmed government employee. We walked him through the file. It started with the housewarming fiasco, then backtracked into Donna's greatest hits: fines for chalk art, unauthorized garden gnomes, and a neighbor's mailbox she claimed had rebellious posture. Jerome read silently at first, then began muttering under his breath. Things like, "You've got to be kidding me," and "Is this real?" Jules chimed in at one point. "It's real, we just wish it wasn't." When he hit the section on violation letters citing unapproved Easter decor, he let out a laugh-snort combo that sounded like it escaped against his will. But it was the financial section that made him sit up straighter. That's where the paper trail turned from funny to felonious. Multiple reimbursement requests. Same signature, same address, same date ranges. But the recipients? Community contractors that all linked back to Donna or her cousin's landscaping business. And every expense was labeled something vaguely righteous. Security barrier adjustment, beautification perimeter, emergency decorative upgrades. In other words, she'd been using HOA funds to upgrade her own lawn while calling it a community service. We gave Jerome receipts, photos, and payment logs. Tina even brought in aerial drone footage, legally obtained I should add, of Donna's new retaining wall and the mysteriously improved side path only she used. One invoice was so bold it said lighting enhancement for HOA entryway, but the lights were clearly lining her private backyard fence. She paved her downfall in brick paths labeled beautification, I said, and Jerome just nodded like a man watching slow-motion fraud unfold. Do you have any financial authority on the board? He asked. Nope, I said. Just a grill and a memory. He sighed. Well, this just got interesting. By the end of our second meeting, he'd compiled enough data to initiate an emergency budget freeze, and when word of that hit the board, Donna spiraled faster than a leaf in a leaf blower. The next HOA newsletter she sent out was titled Preserving Integrity in Times of Sabotage. It included phrases like external aggression, coordinated smear tactics, and my personal favorite, unauthorized oversight enthusiasm. It read like a Cold War memo written by someone who failed community theater. She even accused an unnamed neighbor, I wonder who, of exploiting structural loopholes to destabilize neighborhood unity. I mean, sure, I did exploit a loophole by reading, but destabilize unity? That was her department. Meanwhile, the board members, those who weren't already halfway out the door, started asking real questions. Deschamps, the treasurer, admitted Donna handled most reimbursements herself. She said it was faster that way, he told me. Said paperwork slowed down excellence. I almost choked on my iced tea. That's the thing about unchecked power. It's not efficient. It's just quiet until it explodes. And Donna? She lit the fuse, wrote it off as a landscaping expense, and assumed no one would notice the smoke. By week's end, the city issued a formal freeze on all discretionary HOA spending until a third-party audit could be completed. Donna received the notice at 7:15 a.m. and immediately accused the mail carrier of interference. When he refused to take the envelope back, she threatened to call the postmaster. At this point, even her porch plants looked tired. She retreated indoors, blinds drawn, and the Facebook group went eerily silent. No more warnings about trash bins. No more blurry photos of suspicious squirrels. It was like watching a local storm system run out of thunder. And the rest of us? We could breathe. For the first time in months, people in Foxwater Pines were walking slower, waving more, and smiling without checking their front steps for citations. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. But I wasn't celebrating yet. This wasn't over. The money trail was just the beginning. The audit would dig deeper, and I had no doubt it would uncover more beautifications that magically matched Donna's property footprint. Still, I allowed myself a small moment of satisfaction. Jules and I sat on the porch that night, sipping lemonade. Real lemonade, not the kind you serve under HOA. You think she knows it's over? Jules asked. I watched Donna's porch light flicker, fancy, new, and hopefully the last thing she ever billed to the community. No, I said. But I think she finally knows someone's watching, because when the city froze the funds, Donna didn't just lose power, she lost her playbook and her porch heater. I should have known Donna wouldn't go quietly. After the city froze the HOA funds and the audit uncovered enough beautification reimbursements to rival a small-town slush fund, she went dark for about a week. No flyers, no posts, no porch pacing, just radio silence and a tightly shut front door. Then it came. A thick white envelope delivered by certified mail, addressed to me and Jules, with a return label from a law firm I recognized from late-night commercials. Inside, a cease and desist letter accusing us of coordinated defamation, reputational sabotage, and willful neighborhood destabilization. In short, Donna was suing us for embarrassing her with facts. Jules read it twice and laughed so hard she cried. She thinks she could win this? I shook my head. She thinks this is her last chance to control the narrative, but when you build your house on HOA quicksand, even your Hail Mary lands face first in the mud. We didn't panic. We called Raina. Her exact words were, "Oh, absolutely not." She drafted a response so sharp it probably cut through the fax machine. Within a week, Donna's lawyer withdrew the suit, citing irreconcilable differences in scope and merit. Translation? Even they didn't buy what she was selling. After that, Donna did what tyrants always do when the audience stops clapping. She vanished. Her house went on the market the following weekend. posted as motivated seller, quiet block. Quiet, indeed. No more unapproved solar lighting complaints. No more citations for front yard exuberance. She packed her flags, her flyers, and whatever was left of her pride. And just like that, the reign of Donna came to a sun-bleached, curtain-tugging close. But here's the twist. What followed wasn't chaos. It was community. With Donna gone, the interim board, led by Marlene, a retired librarian with a muffin addiction and the patience of a monk, called an emergency vote to revise the HOA charter. Out went the weaponized language. In came terms like reasonable, transparent, and neighbor-approved. People started stepping out again. Kids drew chalk murals that stretched half a block. Jules hosted a Friday night potluck where no one brought store-bought food out of fear. And me, I grilled. Not in defiance, not in protest, just because it finally felt like home. I even caught Walter humming next to his rebellious mailbox. The air had changed. We weren't afraid of rules anymore. We were just done being ruled. A few weeks later, I got a package. No sender. Inside was a shadow box, neatly arranged with 3 things: a miniature lawn flamingo, a tiny model police badge, and a sticker that read, "Real Sheriff Now." No note, no hint. Just perfect timing. Jules saw it and burst out laughing. "Please tell me you're hanging that in the garage." I did, right next to the original HOA warning Donna sent us about our unapproved porch light fixture. It felt right. 2 symbols of the same story, one built on fear, the other on friendship. I didn't need a trophy, but a plastic flamingo wearing invisible sunglasses? That I could work with. Sometimes your legacy isn't carved in stone. It's glued in a shadow box and mailed with no return address. As summer rolled in, Foxwater Pines finally started living up to its name. Marlene's new board introduced movie nights, garden swaps, and an actual welcome committee that didn't lead with threats. One afternoon, she invited me to speak at the community clubhouse. I kept it short, just thanked the neighbors for sticking together and reminded them that rules aren't the problem. It's what we let them become. I closed by saying, we don't need perfect lawns to be a perfect neighborhood. We just need a little decency and maybe fewer bylaws about wind chimes. They laughed, they clapped, and then they passed a motion to limit future fines unless 2/3 of homeowners agreed. That night, Jules leaned over and said, "You're a legend now." I smiled. Nah, just a guy who got raided at his own barbecue. And maybe that's the heart of it. This whole saga didn't start with outrage. It started with burgers and lemon bars, but underneath it was something bigger, a community learning that silence doesn't equal peace, that order without empathy is just control with a haircut, and that sometimes the smallest rebellions, chalk art, porch music, a plastic flamingo, are the ones that reset the compass. Donna ruled with noise violations, but in the end, silence was her final eviction notice. I look back now, not with anger, but with quiet pride, because this wasn't just about one bad neighbor. It was about drawing a line, not in chalk, but in courage. It was about showing that dignity doesn't need a spotlight, just a backbone. That truth, when documented patiently, can outlast even the loudest voice. I didn't start this war, but I made sure we ended it right. With laughter, with decency, and with the community finally free to breathe again. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that good neighbors still exist, that fairness still matters, and that power only works when people let it, then you're already part of the solution. So go ahead, like this story if you believe in standing up, leave a comment and tell us what part hit home for you. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the next story, let's just say justice might be quiet, but it never sleeps.